Good evening. My name is Jill Featherstone, and I'm the Director of Education with the Des Moines Art Center. And it is just my pleasure to have so many of you joining us tonight. You are in for such a treat to hear one of the most brilliant and funny artists that I have had the pleasure of listening to in more than 2 decades of working at the Des Moines Art Center. You're going to feel so enriched after you hear this talk. So thank you for being here. I'm going to introduce both Laura Burkhalter, who is the Des Moines curator of this exhibition, and then I will introduce Judith, and Judith will take over the slide controls. So if you haven't had the privilege of meeting Laura Burkhalter yet, she can wave her real hand there. Laura Burkhalter is the curatorial manager with the Des Moines Arts Center, and she joined the museum in 1999 as a curatorial assistant and has progressively increased her responsibilities with the museum. She has also served as the docent lecturer for the Art Center's Museum Education Department, and she and I have developed a close friendship over the years. She has curated several major exhibitions for the museum, including Alchemy, Transformations in Gold, Laurel Nakadate, Strangers and Relations, Transparencies, Contemporary Art and History of Glass, and 2019's fantastic exhibition, Monumental Valley. Additionally, she has been involved in the Iowa Artist Exhibition for nearly every year since her tenure, with the exception of this year. And if you haven't seen it yet, there's a beautiful Iowa Artist show on view at the museum, showcasing the work of Olivia Valentine. So I do encourage you to not only see Olivia's exhibition, but come and see Judith's extraordinary show, The Path to Paradise. So Laura, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
I will introduce Judith. Judith Schaechter has stretched the medium of stained glass into a potent and incisive art form for the 21st century, boldly paving her way in the diverse arena of contemporary art. Her work is represented in over a dozen museums, including the Museum of Art and Design in Philadelphia, or the Museum of Art and Design, Philadelphia Museum of Art, Smithsonian American Museum, and the Toledo Museum of Art, and has been in major exhibitions around the world. In addition, through her extensive teaching, she has furthered her influence to her peers and younger generations of artists. Her awards include 2 NEA Visual Arts Fellowships, a Lewis Comfort Tiffany Foundation Award, a Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant Award, and a Guggenheim Fellowship Award, and a USA Artist Rockefeller Fellow and an American Craft Council College of Fellows Award. So these are just a few of the accolades. But the biggest accolade is to just come and see her work in person. It's astonishing. So Judith, we are so pleased to have you here with us tonight. So we will start with a mini round of applause and get you going.
Jill, thank you. I don't know who you were describing, but they sound very accomplished. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really delighted to be here. Laura, I want to thank you and the Des Moines Arts Center for hosting the exhibition. And Jess Martin, who isn't here, I always want to thank her. She is the organizing curator. This exhibition happened almost entirely during COVID. And it's been, gosh, it's been a pleasure. I wish it hadn't happened during COVID, but besides that, it's been a real pleasure, and I'm really grateful to the hosting institution. So thank you so much. All right, so I will share my screen. First, my background. First and foremost, you need to know that I grew up in the 1970s. And what I remember about the 1970s is illustrated here. Patty Hearst, Richard Nixon, and the Cold War, and the beginnings of the ozone. I remember doing a report on the destruction of the ozone when I was in 7th grade. I am a mixed heritage person. This is a picture of my family tree, and this is myself and my brother down here, and this is my mother. My mother is from Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and my father is a Russian Jew from Italy and Ecuador. He never lived anywhere near Russia. And he went to the University of Kansas where he met my mother, and they got married and had us. I know a lot about my mother's ancestry because I paid for Ancestry.com, and everyone has done your history for you if you can get back a few generations. It was pretty fascinating. But the reason I bring this up is because in some ways, as a child, I always felt like an outcast. I never quite fit in with any group, and I was a total nerd in school. This is my committee of grandmothers. This is my actual grandmother right here. And this is her mother here. And then these are various other grandmothers. I'm not religious at all, but I do feel that I have a committee of grandmothers cheering me on from the beyond. Women who I feel, especially in the case of my actual grandmother that I knew, that she was very artistic, extremely creative, and I think would have liked to have had my career. So I feel like they're cheering me on. As a little girl, I was obsessed with dolls. One day, my mother told me I would grow out of doll play. And I remember being absolutely horrified at learning this. And I'm telling you this now because I am going to bring it up later in the talk. I was a doll abuser, although in my defense, I will say I had to cut off their hands and toes because they didn't fit into the clothes I was sewing them if I didn't. And obviously every doll needs a haircut. The bruises, Your Honor, are oxidized wires. I swear they fell off the swing set. Anyway, so I was really obsessed with dolls. When I look at my childhood art, it would seem that I am a case of arrested development. Now, in this talk, I will be talking about a lot of the pieces that are in the exhibition. And it was interesting being the subject of a retrospective. I will say, it was hard because I wanted to control the process myself, and I felt it was really not my business to do so. This was a piece that both myself and Jess Martin wanted to include, but it is lost, so it's not in the show. But anyway, so when I say a case of arrested development, this is an image of a person in a coffin, and I had done a image of Winston Churchill in his coffin when I was 4. I saw the funeral. I wasn't some sort of child prodigy. Believe me, I was not a child prodigy. I was a real underachiever, actually. But I saw the funeral. I think it was upsetting to me. We were living in England at the time, and there was nothing else on TV, and I was actually sick. So they had propped me up so that I could watch it. These are blankets and pillows because I did not want Winston to be cold in his coffin. And I was also very fond, you see, I think I have a little of the dyslexia. That says Judy, sort of. I was very fond of drawing frowning princesses, which I believe I ended up getting sent home with a note, like little Judy might have a problem. Anyway, this piece is in the exhibition and is basically the same idea. Another important thing about my childhood that has a direct impact on how I think about my artwork is that my brother had encephalitis when he was about 9 years old. The encephalitis left him with damage to both Broca and Wernicke's area of the brain. These are the two areas that govern cognitive and speech function. So this event transformed my family. My mother, who was a social worker, had a lifelong interest in language development, and my brother's severe delay in that department had the effect that I was really interested in conversations about how visual thinking intersects or doesn't intersect with verbal thinking. I remember when I was young, my mother saying, honey, she had some weird things to say. Honey, would you rather be deaf or blind? And I was like, definitely I picked deaf. And she said, oh, you should pick blind because you can still be an artist if you're blind, but if you don't have speech, you don't learn symbolism. I was probably like 9, and it was like, thanks, Mom. We'll talk later. Anyway, I will say that when I work now, I'm sort of acutely aware of whether or not I'm in a verbal mode or a visual mode. And when I'm in the studio, I make an actual deliberate effort to sort of get rid of my verbal tendencies, if at all possible. And this image on the screen is a barn that my brother built. He could talk maybe a little bit, but not very much. And that's him in front of it. And he just wanted to build a barn. So he basically trash picked wood and commenced to build, and built this absolutely fantastic structure that should have been on the cover of Raw Vision magazine when that existed. But of course, no one knows about it unless I talk about it. And then when he could communicate better, he indicated that it wasn't barn-like enough. So they tore this magnificent piece of folk art down and built this rather conventional shed instead. I'm sure these people, the Macamans who lived here, they were probably delighted, but whatever. This is the first painting I ever did. My grandmother that I showed you a picture of taught me how to oil paint. And because she was an oil painter, she started when she was 70, but she was billed as an oil painter, and she was certainly extremely artistic. I was going to become an oil painter like grandma, and I never questioned this all the way up until RISD. I had an early obsession with prettiness and ugliness. I would say, and that is extremely critical in my work today. I was teased when I was little. I was told I was ugly. My family, when I went home, my family would say things like, pretty is as pretty does, honey. And I was like, what? Okay. And so I was doing beauty contests and like sort of satiric caricatures. A little later, I so wanted to be a hippie and go experience the summer of love in Haight-Ashbury. However, I was only 8 years old. So this of course is later. I did a psychedelic picture for Daddy. All right, a question I often get is, how did you get into stained glass? And this really is my first stained glass piece. It's one of those carcinogenic bake in the oven stained glass projects. I'd always had these sort of like proto stained glassy tendencies, maybe. Like I said, I thought I was going to be an oil painter, and this is something I did when I was a sophomore at Rhode Island School of Design. But the history of painting was extremely intimidating. It seemed very serious, very highbrow, and very alien to my personal interests. It also, and a lot of my comments right now are sort of from hindsight, but I will say it seemed suspiciously Oedipal. Like the art movements of the 20th century was all these guys who were hell-bent on overturning what the last guy did in some sort of mad competitive dash towards ever more purity or whatever. And honestly, I felt like it had nothing to do with any traditions, anything I understood, anything that had anything to do with me. And to be honest, in some ways, I didn't like that art very much. I didn't feel I had much in common with them. When I went to art school, I was told that art could be anything because, after all, hadn't Marcel Duchamp exhibited a urinal in that fateful moment? But it turned out there were all sorts of things art was not allowed to be. When I made art that was decorative, illustrative, craftsy, kitschy, or pretty, all of the reasons I actually wanted to be an artist in the first place, I was told that it wasn't art. And perhaps the two most critical cardinal sins of all was to be sentimental or to make something that was pretty. Ever since the critic Clement Greenberg said, all profoundly original art looks ugly at first, it seemed that in order to qualify as profoundly original, one literally had to strive to make art as ugly as possible. So thank you, Clement Greenberg. All right. As it happens, the glass program at RISD was located right next door to the graduate painting studios. And us undergraduate painters would always go up there to see what the graduate students were doing for inspiration. And while I was up there one day, I saw the stained glass class and I immediately wanted to take the class. I specifically wanted to make something for my apartment. I didn't want to be a stained glass artist when I saw this stuff. I just wanted to make one little innocent piece for my apartment. And so I took the elective class, which was actually full. I had to try hard to get into this elective class. And in my painting classes around that time, I had gotten to the critical moment that happens basically to everyone who goes to art school or studies art. And that is that we had painted nudes and still lives, and the teacher said to us, okay, it's time for you to paint whatever you want from now on. Find your voice. And I had that horrible moment where I realized I did not have a voice. And so I went looking for my voice, and I looked for my voice everywhere. I looked for it in art history. It certainly wasn't there. I looked for it in the RISD library. I looked for it in museums. I imitated Giotto, who was one of my favorite painters, and Francis Bacon. And even, you will be surprised, of all people, I imitated Yves Klein and Edward Muybridge, which is what this is. But in none of these people did I find my authentic voice as an artist. Now, at the same time in the stained glass class, I was tasked with coming up with an idea for a project. And you see, I had taken tons of art history. In my high school, we had advanced placement art history, and RISD didn't accept the credits. So I had taken AP art history twice. I was full of art history. So when I had to come up with a project for stained glass, it was great. Stained glass meant nothing to me. There was no procession of geniuses, no avant-garde history, unless you count Dale Chihuly, and I most emphatically do not, even though I owe Dale a great debt, but it's not for being an avant-garde artist. No one was eager to see the next big stained glass thing. No one was deconstructing the semiotics of stained glass. It basically, the field seemed lawless and wide open. It was entirely in the margins. And I probably owe the greatest debt to Richard Harnett, who is just recently retired from Ohio State University. He told me, when I said, what I want to do can't be done in stained glass, he said, anything can be done in stained glass. And I took that to, I didn't take that to mean like any subject matter can be rendered in stained glass. I thought he meant anything in the world can be done in stained glass. And I was like, all right. Now, I had been doodling in the margins of my pages for a long, long time, and I was almost always told I should stop. Never in school, never even in art school, did anyone point out that this utter profusion of imagination was perhaps, possibly, maybe, I don't know, worthy of pursuing, that it was in fact a wellspring of inspiration. I think probably my painting teachers were of the generation that matured in the 1970s, which was sort of the height of conceptual art. And I thought, all right, well, stained glass doesn't matter. These drawings don't matter. I shall mate them. So right there in that stained glass class, pretty much overnight, it really happened fast. I had my Wizard of Oz moment. And you will recall that the point of the whole movie of the Wizard of Oz is that the lion, the scarecrow, the Tin Man, and even Dorothy were seeking something outside of themselves that the wizard, who isn't really a wizard, points out is within them the whole time. And that for me, when I realized that the secret of art had been in me this whole time, I just hadn't noticed. It was the point of no return. I could no longer be critiqued. I didn't care if you called it art, craft, illustration, or dimensional cremo. I was in love with what I was doing, and I wasn't going to stop because some professor had a gripe with it. It would be like someone saying, like, I don't like your boyfriend's sweater. It's like, and I care why. Now, in the 1980s, when I was in college, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 1983. The East Village art scene in New York City was cartoony, rude, and crude, and it strove to shock the establishment out of what seemed like some sort of conservative and stodgy coma with its irreverent and brash DIY punk ethos. Punk was, at least in part, about upsetting and scaring people on purpose. It felt like we children of the 70s had been left with the smoldering ashes of the hippie dream. The Beatles had turned into bands like Styx. Ew. Our culture had gone from something that was refreshing to something that desperately needed flushing. The people a little older than me, because I'm actually about 3 years too young to actually be a punk. there's like these tiny little increments. We felt a duty to be rude. We felt an obligation to be shocking. And it wasn't just to upset the establishment, but I think we all felt unheard, unpopular, like ugly misfit children who couldn't even get hippies who supposedly espoused free love for everybody. They weren't even going to let us into their gangs. So we felt life was ugly and we were not going to sugarcoat it. So if you ever wonder why my work, especially my early work, looks the way it does, I think that in a paragraph is the single best explanation. This piece is in the exhibition. When I was in art school, a critique I got very frequently was that my artwork was mere shock value. It's always those three words: mere shock value, not shock value, mere shock value. Thank you. I remember. You know what? I denied it. That strikes me as funny now because I finally got to a point where I can say, you know what? I was dying to be shocking. I had been such a good, obedient child for so long. I had been so constrained. All of my, I just was dying to break out and upset someone. And I will say, another thing that I noticed at that time was that all of my painting subjects looked a lot more dignified in stained glass. What in painting tended to look like teenage angst took on a real pathos in glass. So this is also in the exhibition. And now, because it's never a good idea for me to delay this discussion, I will tell you about technique. That is Titian's Venus of Urbino, starring me. All right, now this is kind of an image that I don't expect you to understand, but I work with the type of glass that is called flash glass. This on the left here, this is a piece of red flash glass, and this is a piece of blue flash glass. And these two pieces are put together, one on top of the other, and this is a photograph of them together. So a piece of red flash glass appears to be just a solid sheet of red, and blue, a solid sheet of blue, etc. when you get them. And they're about 2 feet by 3 feet. And they're hand blown basically in Germany or France. And they are characterized by having a very intense veneer of very, very bright color. This is made when you blow glass and you want it to have color. You start with a tank of clear, you make a clear bubble, you make the bubble kind of big enough, and then you dip it into the color tank. So, and then you blow the bubble out so it's really thin and you make it into sheets of glass. If this glass were solid red or this was solid blue, it would be black and it would not transmit light well. So they invented this in the Middle Ages for practical reasons. But because we have power tools, we can remove that layer of color as I have done here. So I have removed the red wherever you see yellow or white or some sort of shaded tone like these. And I've done that with a sand blaster, which I have in my basement. And I stack the red and the blue and I mix them with yellow, and then I have red, yellow, and blue, and we're off to the races with the three primary colors. And you can get a lot of variation in color. So when you look at an image like this, which is also in the exhibition, I want to direct your attention to these vignettes here. This is from what year? 2018, so it's relatively recent. I didn't even know I could render glass in glass. The way I made these is in those same layers. So this piece here is this red and this blue put together, and there it is. The yellow is a chemical called silver stain. And silver stain is basically silver nitrate that has been mixed with clay gamboge so that you can paint it on. And that is the origin of the term stained glass. If it doesn't have stain on it, it's not stained glass. Purists will tell you that. And it sinks into the glass and turns it yellow when you put it in a kiln at about 1,000 degrees. And you can see there's some black paint on it here and here. And the black paint also fuses and fires on in a kiln. Now, every now and then, I also use pink enamel or sometimes pink oil paint, which does not fire on. And those are not light fast, so those windows would not last, the pink area wouldn't last in sunlight for very long. But they're in light boxes, so it doesn't matter. And that's the gist of it. So the figure, this figure here, looks like this when it's taken apart. So that's a red piece of glass that I've carved into with sandblasting. In this case, and in the flowers as well, I'm doing multiple subtractive techniques. So I'm carving, I'm removing color, and I'm doing it with sandblasting, with basically, like most lay people call them Dremel tools, but I use a Fordham flex shaft, if you know what that is. It's a dentist drill. It sounds just like a dentist drill. And by the way, they're very similar, and I always have really great conversations when I'm at the dentist about equipment. And I also do a lot of hand filing, which I will show you in mere moments. So this piece, Feral Child, in the exhibition, the way I made this area here, which is birds, the layers look like this separate. So this is after they've been sandblasted, and this is after they have been done with the Fordham flex shaft and some hand filing. So sometimes I unplug and use hand files. So there's 3 layers. There's also a pink on clear layer. And when you put them all together, they look like that. There is nothing else there. See, there's paint on and silver stain on the red, but that is everything that you're seeing there. And as for the face in that piece, these are the layers separated for the face. This was originally a piece of red glass, but there is so much done to it. It has silver stain, it has paint, it's engraved, it's filed, all sorts of stuff. By the way, you might be interested to know pink glass is made with gold, and therefore it's expensive. This piece, I will show you this part. This is how I go about the hand filing, and I have a little video to show you next. So the hand filing is something that I invented myself. I was working with the power tools, and they all use diamond burrs and diamond bits. And it occurred to me one day, there's no reason this has to be plugged in. Diamonds will scratch glass whether they're attached to electricity or not. And this gave me the level of control that I could get these tonal transitions. So I have this little video to show you, which will explain everything. It's a few minutes long, and it's always a challenge to see if I can get it to play. All right, here we go. It's speeded up. So it actually took me about a half an hour to do this, or 45 minutes. And this is me just doing it in 3 minutes instead. That's the hand file right there. It looks just like a nail file, only it has diamonds on it. And that's the flexible shaft engraving tool. This technique requires a lot of cold water, which is, there's a water bottle you see every now and then. I'm squirting it with water because diamond tools need to be kept cool. And there you go, there's the red eyeball. This piece, the Life Ecstatic, I'm just going to show you this piece, this area in progress. So it's a piece of red on clear flash glass and a piece of teal, it's this color, on top of it, making these flowers. And then I'm going into it here and I'm sandblasting some areas and just starting to work it. And this is it a little more. And here we have the whole, the full Monty with all the paint and the silver stain and some pink, that's probably oil paint in that case. And this is what it looked like finished, or you can see it in the exhibition. I'm going to talk about this piece again in a minute. All right, so just a little bit of history. You know, I'm actually really interested in the history of stained glass, which kind of surprises me considering my response to the history of painting. But at some point, my dad gave me a book of these rondelles, which are all just glass paint and silver stain on circles. And I found them fascinating. They're hysterically funny. I mean, I don't even want to know what this is a picture of, but I'm really glad that it exists and that medieval people did it for some reason, actually post-medieval picture. So in addition to rondelles, there's this tradition of basically diamond shapes that are called quarries. And, you know, when I talked about drawing in the margins of my pages, doodling, I think, you know, all these things were in these Christian churches, but obviously these are not Bible scenes. They're not even close. So whenever, like, people, the gatekeepers weren't paying attention, these artists were getting away with crazy stuff. It's the same in Gothic manuscripts. They're like Mad Magazine. They're amazing. So another technique I employ is this same type of historical rondelle quarry painting, silver staining thing. So here is the rondelle that's in the middle of this piece, which is called Immigration Policy. It's in the exhibition. And here are the stages of painting. I paint on a sandblasted surface. The paint is disgusting. It's water-based paint. It's like painting with dirt. It does not have anything in common with oil paint whatsoever. I remember, like, in 2004, I did this one piece and I remember thinking, I think, you know, finally catching on to how to use this stuff. But you paint it, you fire it, you paint some more, you fire it, go into it with some drills, paint some more, fire it, and so on and so forth. I'm showing you 5 images here. It was probably more like 10 stages. And here are some of the little quarries. All right. What lecture would be complete without the definition of art? I know you want to know. So I went to RISD. Have I mentioned that yet? And when I was at RISD, I took an art history class called Sky Father, Earth Mother. It was taught by this guy named Dirk Bach. And Dirk Bach had been a spy in the Vietnam War, and he was really handsome. Can I just say I would have taken any class that guy taught. I even took the history of photography because he taught it like I care. I retained none of it. Anyway, in Sky Father, Earth Mother, he talked about, he put forth a definition of art, and his definition of art was universal. It wasn't for what was happening in New York City this week. It was, what has art always been to all people, all times, in all cultures, forever. And what he said, as I recall, was that art is the equivalent of a "you are here" map, like you see in a mall. You know where you are because you look at the "you are here" map. But instead of locating your body in physical space, what this kind of map does is it locates your spirit in the cosmos. And now that might sound all very new agey and wifty, but I certainly appreciated it myself. I do think of art as being a way of gauging your existence in comparison to this sort of weird living object. Oh, and this is why I'm showing you this again. You are here. I am actually right here, right now. That is where I live, in case you want to stalk me. I live in a Vietnamese neighborhood in Philadelphia. All right. And so people have sometimes asked, what's with all these people all alone in the center of your image? Well, I don't know. It's a "you are here" map. They're at the center of their universe. And that's a close-up. This one is not quite so symmetrical. It's in the exhibition, and I don't usually have major regrets, but I wish I hadn't titled this one "The Birth of Eve," because I feel like that's so leads you to such a Christian interpretation. I'm actually not even slightly a Christian, so I don't know. Here's a close-up of that. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about my creative process. I would say the number one question most artists get in interviews or even casual conversation is, where do you get your ideas? So I get my ideas in several major ways. One, from the glass itself, or the process of working with this technique. Two, from drawing, and three, from stealing. So I will now discuss them in detail. First and foremost, I am inspired by the materials and process of stained glass. I remember some years back, another glass artist said to me, "Why don't you just paint? They might as well just be paintings." And it was like, I don't believe in violence, or I would actually hit you right now. They're stained glass because I freaking hate oil paint. I really like stained glass, all right? Is that a good enough reason? Can we go now? I like to try to do things with stained glass that it might not want to do. So for example, like water doesn't have black outlines defining it. So it seemed like a challenge to try to depict water. In the case of this one, the layers of the dream section, if you see the show there, it's very dimensional. There's at least a full inch of space in there. So the transparency is creating some interesting interactions. A piece that's not in the exhibition is a better example. So see this here, it's hard to see, so I will show it to you separate. When I couldn't be with my partner, I decided to invoke him in a stained glass window, and I did it by smushing us together, even though that doesn't look like him and it doesn't look like me. It's us, trust me. A similar piece is Chona bark, which the central portion here looks like that. It's basically a Rorschach blot because the red and the blue are the opposite of each other, but when you put them down, they sort of do this thing. Another thing about glass and stained glass that interests me is to make things intentionally difficult. Now, when I saw the exhibition in Rochester, they had put quotes on the wall, and one of them was, I just say things. I don't expect them to end up on the walls, but I said something about craft being an extreme sport. I knew the second I said it, I knew I'd regret it, especially because other glass artists probably don't appreciate that characterization even slightly. But I will say, for me, at least, I am interested in making my projects intentionally difficult. It can't be hard enough in some ways. These are all separate pieces of glass, and it was hard. Can I just say it was hard? Here's another example of that, and I'm showing it to you with reflected light so you can see how many billions of tiny little pieces of glass are in this. I actually worked with a helper, but she quit because it was such a horrible experience. So I made it basically myself. It's important to me to make them as horribly difficult as possible because I still don't have a language articulate enough to explain this. I feel like I want you to pay attention to this stuff, and I want it to be worth your while. I want you to know that I thought it was important, and I thought it was important enough to sort of bleed a little. Sometimes literally. I used to be afraid of blood. Interesting trivia. I was afraid of blood before I got into stained glass. Now I'm not afraid of blood. I don't like it, but whatever. So I want it to be a demonstration of basically of sacrifice, that I am willing to go to all kinds of crazy lengths to make this image. I could make this image out of 2 sheets of glass with no cut lines in it, right? Because I have all kinds of techniques to do that, but I have deliberately chosen to make it in a million little tiny pieces of glass. But wait, there's more. If you act now, you can see what it looked like on Friday. This is what it looked like on Sunday. On Friday, it looked like this, and this is all the pieces in bowls. I had to have like a system of sorting them where I knew where they were. And this was the original resolution for the piece, and I was very unsatisfied, so I pulled it apart and finished it like this. And I also just want to share with you that I am an avid collector of images. I love images of men crawling on all fours, don't ask. And this piece was based loosely on this. I used to post a lot of weird images on Facebook, basically to prove to my cousins in Oklahoma that I did not single-handedly invent the idea of being a weirdo myself. And I know this is Lucas Cranach, and I had that one. That was the first weird thing I put on Facebook. Another aspect of the glass that inspires me is the fact that you can improvise with it. I know most people imagine that these things are highly planned out, and they're really not. So this was based on this drawing. That was all I had to go on, and I worked with the glass to turn it into this. And these are the 3 layers. I feel like we're gonna run out of time, so I should kind of go a little faster. Another way that I get ideas is by drawing. Now the word to draw means to pull or drag something so as to make it follow behind. Now, I always wished that I was a visionary artist, that I could just conjure up scenes in my head and shut my eyes and then life draw from my imagination. But I will tell you, when I shut my eyes, I see a shopping list. I see a shopping list. It's like, I need Brussels sprouts, I need vitamin pills, paper towels. I don't see fantastic images. So, but I see them when I put them on the piece of paper. I have to pull them out of my head and put them on paper in order to see them myself. So that is how I go about it. Faculty meetings are incredibly helpful. And then I input them into Photoshop so they look neat and pretty. So this is what it would have looked like originally, and then I'd make it into a clean sheet like that. So the piece in the exhibition, Specimens, is based on these doodles. So I'm still doodling. And finally, stealing. I steal a lot of images. This is the first piece I made after I graduated from Lizzie. I was going to go back to oil painting, but that just didn't work. This piece was based, this is a type of Russian folk art called lubok. And I don't really know what lubok is, but I did a piece based on my cat on that lubok. And there's some weird instances of stealing. So for example, Child Bride was made subsequent to seeing my friend Susan Hagen's sculpture, which I think it's called Green Woman. Now, I forgot that I saw this, and I'm pretty sure that I forgot as a convenient way to make it okay and safe for me to rip her off shamelessly. Now, Susan is a good sport, and she didn't mind at all that I did this. She believes in a free marketplace of ideas, apparently. She told me she'd ripped off the Green Man from Celtic history anyway. And I did agree to show her piece in lectures. And this piece that I showed you before was pretty much directly stolen from the Lady in the Unicorn tapestries. And I thought you might be interested to see what it looked like without the red glass on it. This is what it looks like in the exhibition, and this is what it looked like in progress. A major part of the exhibition is this piece, The Battle of Carnival and Lent, which was acquired by the Rochester Memorial Art Gallery, who organized a show kind of around this piece. This was made for an installation I did at Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, and based on the painting, The Battle between Carnival and Lent by Peter Bruegel the Elder. And here are a few close-ups. And that's it in the penitentiary. So another thing, I think my brain is like this stew pot, and I put tons and tons of stuff in there, and then it all mixes together and eventually come up with some piece like this. So I'll do that again. This piece plus these two pieces equals this piece. There's a lot of examples of this in my work, and I could just do a whole lecture based on this, but I won't. These are the separated layers, and this is what it looks like together. And also, I think I steal things without any knowledge whatsoever, you know? I actually sort of firmly believe in the idea of a collective subconscious. This piece, which is relatively recent, it was pointed out to me is a favorite of mine, so I have to show you a lot of pictures of it. An art critic said it was Danae. This is one of 6 versions painted by Titian. I never heard of Danae when I did this piece. It was when the art historian pointed it out to me, and I realized, of course it's a picture of Danae. I totally don't have a problem claiming that, even though I didn't know it when I made it. And the piece Beached Whale, which is in the exhibition and has been acquired by the Des Moines Art Center, was based on my rather extensive collection of beached whale imagery, which I could go on and on about this. Basically, what I think is that beached whales have fascinated people for centuries. It's not, I did the piece because of climate change, but I think that the idea of these enormous, powerful animals just sort of washing up on shore and being dead was shocking to people for a long time, a really profound experience. So I've always collected images, and I combined the beached whale with the Martin Johnson Heade painting and made this. It also has, you know, it's never a bad time for a curtain. All right, and now perfectionism are us. I'm just gonna delete that. This is a picture of my actual studio. I'm very picky. Sometimes most of my pieces are made more than once, but you don't see it because I don't finish them. I bring them to a certain point and then change my mind scrap the parts I don't like and finish it with a different resolution. But every now and then I finish one all the way and decide I don't like it and make it over again, which is the case with this. And this is in the exhibition. And you know what? I actually kind of like it more anyway. This one, which I showed you before, I made that figure 3 times. Now, ordinarily they would end up in that scrap pile, but I decided if I assembled them as studies, I could actually maybe make some money on it. I know that's very mercenary of me, but this stuff takes a long time. So I did that. And this piece, which I will come back to, I made it 4 times in glass, but I didn't solder it. Well, I soldered it together 3 times. I soldered it. So I made it like this and I hated it. And then I decided to make it like this. And I was I just didn't learn anything from it. That really bothered me. And then I made it like this, but it was just slightly too small for the figure. She didn't have any breathing room, even though she's kind of supposed to be kind of like maybe dead. So I then made it a 4th time. And this one got destroyed and this one got destroyed. And I did assemble this one. And this is what the piece looked like finished. This was based on an opera. I'm not into opera, but I heard this song called the Cold Song, and the Cold Genius, it's Purcell, Henry Purcell sings it. And he's basically saying he's been shut out of love his whole life, so he might as well just freeze to death. And there is a punk rock version by Klaus Nomi, who was very popular in New York in the very early 1980s. I was a big Klaus Nomi fan. And he sang it basically the week before he died of AIDS. And he sings it so profoundly beautifully. I was just moved to make, I never wanted to illustrate anything. I just wanted to make some sort of visual analog of that aria. And this is what I came up with. Apropos of which, Judith, why is your work so depressing? When I get asked this, I think, what? You've never seen any sad art before? None, ever? Not a single piece of sad art? You can't think of a single reason why anyone would want to listen to a sad song on purpose? I have made some depressing pieces. And I have made some outright agonized faces. I have made some characters that appear not to care less what is happening to them. And I have made some faces that are somewhat neutral. It's pretty hard to do a good neutral face, by the way. And some are in ecstasy, so it's not all depressing. There is also stuff that straddles the line between agony and ecstasy. I will say in the book, The Aesthetic Brain by Anjan Chatterjee, a neurologist, he talks about how during orgasm, the expression on a person's face reflects the fact that in that moment, their pain receptors have been turned off. I don't write this stuff, I just read it. There is a reason why we are compelled towards the art forms of tragedy, the sad song, and other types of art that might be considered negative. And it's not just masochism or Schadenfreude or some weird need to be morose. I think that there is a real connection between beauty and grief. I do not do depressing artwork to add to the gross national per capita misery. I don't even make miserable things because I need to express my own sorrow. No, I do it because this is the best way I can express empathy. When I was young, I think I was pretty depressed as a child. And I was often told by well-meaning people to cheer up. And they often gave me really good reasons why I should not be unhappy. I wasn't being mistreated. I wasn't starving. I lived in a lovely suburb of Boston, Massachusetts, not in a war zone or a slum. And all of this was very true. But all of those rational arguments just made me feel incredibly guilty. And what made me feel better was sad, sad songs and pictures of martyrs. And I'm not even a Christian. You know what no one needs help in learning how to cope with? Happiness. What people need, in my humble opinion, is to understand how to make their suffering meaningful. People want to understand that life isn't just a terrible joke being made at their expense. And pictures, this by the way is a sewage treatment plant. Pictures can do this because they are safe places in which to rehearse real life situations so you can practice ahead of time. If you experience a sad song or a sad story or a picture, you're really just thinking about sorrow. You don't actually experience a real loss. It's a safe space where the tragedy isn't real and maybe you won't have as much trauma. It gives you a chance to confront the unbearable, the intolerable, and the unendurable in a way that helps you feel the feelings with less risk. I think sometimes people find my work confusing because it's so quote unquote pretty to look at, but the themes can be really dark. I said at the outset that that quote by Clement Greenberg about all profoundly original art being ugly at first. And then I said that that sort of came to mean that if you made something ugly, people might automatically assume that you were doing something very artistic. At least they wouldn't want to miss the boat by sounding like a Philistine and just saying like, ew. So while truth and beauty used to be a synonym in Keats's time, they have somehow come to be opposites. The truth became the ugly truth, and with it, a lot of ideas about authenticity in art. One reason I go out of my way to make my work aesthetically pleasing, beautiful if you find it so, is because I personally went into the arts to make beautiful things. And I did this for intensely personal reasons, because I felt ugly myself, and I felt that I was going to be incapable of seducing anyone ever. So I had this idea that if I could make gorgeous works of art, I could seduce men with them. And I've tried that, and it's only kind of works. Anyway, but I also wanted to say some ugly, ugly stuff. I wanted to speak about the unbearable, the intolerable, and the unendurable in order that we might heal from it. Not that I have any grandiose ideas that it's working, but anyway, I thought that if artwork was going to be horrible to think about, that I owed the viewers something nice looking, because otherwise there would be no incentive to get involved. And even though I had heard just oodles and oodles about systems of beauty being used to oppress people, I could still see with my plain eyeballs that beauty is available to every single human being who is open to experiencing it. And that ultimately, if beauty is in the eye of the beholder, then it is immune to political and economic and other circumstantial troublesomeness. And I wasn't being brainwashed by the Maybelline company every single time I had a beautiful experience in my life. I believe that beauty can save your life. It saved mine. When I was a depressed child, that was what got me through. And this brings me to my second to final point in this lecture. Why do we have, and the students from my class that are here should leave because you're going to have to hear this again this semester. Why do we have the universal experience of love and therefore beauty and attraction? What is the connection between beauty and grief that I mentioned? I believe that we experience love and beauty because we die. Life is precious because it's precarious. The fact that life is fragile, that there is a looming threat of inevitable loss, causes us to value and protect it with our last measures of devotion. If people didn't die, we wouldn't need to have empathy or compassion or even simple caring for others. Because if we were immortal, we wouldn't have to care for the sick or the weak. We wouldn't have to care for anything at all because it would take care of itself. End of story. I find that very, very dreadful, which is why I do not want to be immortal. For this reason, we have love and beauty. And for this reason, beauty will always have a place in the arts, no matter what people try to tell you. Just don't listen to them. And finally, let's talk about me. Are they self-portraits? I have been asked over and over and over again if they're self-portraits. And obviously, they are not intended to be images of my physical self. I see them as dolls. When I Googled sources on doll play, I didn't really find what I was looking for. What I was hoping for was reference to using dolls as proxies for oneself, like counselors do with abused children, or the use of dolls to cast spells, or even the use of effigies to enact rituals of sympathetic magic and sacrifice, because that's how I see the figures in my work. They have a job to do. Obviously, that slide has been misfiled. Obviously, I wish I could tell my mother, basically, that I have found a way to play with dolls for the rest of my life. I win. The joke's on her. That piece is called Self-Portrait, and this is from Autobiography. So I don't think, what I found mostly when I Googled doll play was 10 million articles on whether or not dolls are some sort of gender specific indoctrination and whether we should do this or not. And it's like, all right, can we talk about dolls more than that, please? I don't think dolls are just ways for children or girl children or whatever to practice future motherhood. They certainly were not for me. I tortured Tammy to death for not being a Barbie when I got a Barbie by drawing all over her with pencil and frying her on a light bulb. If that's practicing motherhood, we're in trouble. So for me, dolls were really a way of acting out. And that's how I see how the figures in my work are functioning. They're doing all the things that I can't or won't. And they're doing all the things that I imagine you can't or won't do too. They are very, very busy. During COVID, I began taking a lot of walks, and I noticed that people everywhere were also taking walks, and all of them had these little plastic bags. And I found those little plastic bags that people were carrying to be a poignant metaphor for life, that we're all just walking around carrying a little bag of poo wherever we go. All right, thank you, everybody. If you have questions, I would be happy to take them if there's time.
We would love for you to take some questions, Judith. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that talk. And I can get things started. Again, everyone, if you will remember, if you will take yourself off of mute and ask your question to Judith, that would be helpful rather than entering things in the chat. Judith, I'll get things started while people are thinking. I have two questions that I've jotted down. I'm wondering if there are any colors that you love more in glass than like the opaque color in real life. You're like, oh boy, glass handles this much better than it is in opacity.
Yes, Jill, all of them.
Oh, okay. I should have expected that. But
particularly red. You know, it's funny. There are no fewer than 2 professional stained glass organizations, and I've been to many of their conferences. A few years ago, it was in Rochester, and they had a Eastman Kodak color scientist there, and he asked the question of all these stained glass people, which is like maybe 50 to 75 in the room, how many of you, your favorite color is blue? Because basically when you ask a crowd of normal people what their favorite color is, there's a preference for blue. But when you ask a stained glass artist, they're all going to say like anything but blue, because we are so sick of blue glass. It's not funny. And lo and behold, blue was in the minority in that group. It was too funny.
I love that.
Blue glass is obviously gorgeous.
And then my second question was, as you mentioned in the piece that you made 4 times, that in the process, you didn't feel like you had learned anything from it. So I'm curious about, like, when you are making a piece, are you realizing that you're learning something in the process, or is it after you're looking at it that you realize, oh, that's what I did differently there? Or does it maybe happen in both of those ways?
I think what I want to learn more than anything on earth is more inspiration. Like, I want something to open up a pathway to new inspiration. And I tend to get angry at my pieces when they don't do that. So when I was young and I had only experimented technically with a few things, it was easy to find new things. And as I get older and I've done more and more and more, it gets a lot harder. Also, as you age, your neurons are sort of frozen in certain paths. So it's gotten harder. And I would say, I don't know if it's learning, maybe learning isn't the best way to phrase it, but I'm an inspiration junkie. And I take it out on the pieces. I don't think it's the job of my artwork to always be inspiring me. I think that I want it to, and I'm happier in my personal life and nicer to my friends when I'm inspired. But yeah, I don't make crappy work when I'm uninspired. I still make, well, whatever you think it is. I make work like I make. I don't have to be inspired, but I sure like it. And so if I'm not inspired, I get mad at the piece, and then I get mad at my partner, and then I get mad at clerks in the store. It's frightful.
That's a fantastic answer. I see Kathy would like to ask a question.
Yes, thank you. First of all, it's a gloomy day here in Des Moines, and I have laughed so hard during your talk here that it's really lifted my spirits. But in addition, I've really enjoyed your show. I've gone 3 times. I live right near the art center, so I keep bringing people back. So thank you. I wasn't sure what to expect at first, but I've told everybody I know that we should come. My question is, you mentioned about your friend who didn't mind that you borrowed from her. Has anyone ever minded that for some of what you call stealing or borrowing from others?
Kathy, I borrow from dead people, which is saves a lot of anguish. Oops, to Susan. Susan's here. She's a lovely person and a good friend of mine. No, I mean, it's personally important to me to, I don't think I really steal. Is that a terrible thing to say after confessing to theft? I mean, it's like heavy influence or something. Sometimes I'm reworking an idea. At some point, a friend of mine told me I was a postmodernist, and I thought, oh, thanks. But then I was put in this really awkward position of teaching a class in postmodernism, and I learned what it was, and I realized, oh my goodness, to the manner born, I am a total postmodernist. And in doing so, I reflect an eclecticity of influence, you know? I'm a mass influence and smush it around. So I wouldn't want, if I upset someone by ripping them off, I would not sleep at night. So if I have done that, I don't know about it, and it would be a mortifying experience for me.
Love your cat. My cats are here too, so they're enjoying.
Pumpkin pie.
Yeah, I've got Mies and Roxy here watching, so they're enjoying it. Thanks so much.
Thank you for bringing people to see the show. I really appreciate that.
More and more until it's over. Thank you.
You rock.
I think I see Keith. Do you have a question?
I do. Hi, Judith. It's Keith. Love the lecture as always. Every time, this is not the same as a creativity thing we did recently, but I was just wondering, I just noticed for the first time, I mean, obviously there's how much dreaming there's going on in your work. And is dreaming part of your process at all for inspiration? I know a lot of it seems automatic, your automatic drawing, but what does dreaming bring to your art?
You can thank your lucky stars. Dreaming has nothing to do with my process, because I dream about nothing except a house I owned on Rodman Street, 5 times a week, I have this dream that I'm renovating that property. It's just like, stop already, dreams. I think that art making is analogous to dreaming. It's not that I draw on my dreams. It's that I'm trying to have a waking dream when I work. And apropos of a lot of the characters dreaming, a really influential experience when I was in art school was discussions about composition, where they talked, first of all, they analyzed composition with like charts and graphs, and that was an eye-opener. But they also talked a lot about how in figurative art, you are directed by what the eyes of the characters are doing. Now, as a female and a feminist, I should be basically only doing images of women staring at you like this, but because a woman with her eyes shut is a real invitation to stare at their body. But I think, you know, most of my work is sort of happens subconsciously. And I think that I personally don't mind providing inanimate proxies for people to lay their eyeballs on if they have that need. You know, it seems like a healthy way to do it. They're not real people, and they don't get upset when you look at them. So it's a way to do it, and they're passive. They're allowing it, basically.
Thanks.
I have done a couple of women staring right out at you, but not that many.
Thanks.
Jill, are you talking? You are muted.
Sorry, yes, I was looking around to see if there were any other hands raised. Would anyone else like to, Shelley and Sean? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was just gonna say, through the exhibit at the Art Center, there's a lot of like different, like pretty serious characters, and then several like really playful, like cartoonish, kind of abstract, weird characters. And if those, really the difference between the two is like, is it the meaning coming across as something, you know, hard to say, but what do you just have fun with certain designs, or is it like some have like a serious character or idea behind it, and then that focuses where the piece itself goes?
That's a really good question. I don't really have a good answer for you. I think that I sort of go through phases when I'm more cartoony. I will say there's a piece at the museum in San Francisco, the De Young, of a girl mourning a rabbit that's been run over in the road. And it was started out real cartoony, and it seemed like I was making fun of it. So I tried to make it more serious. It's hard. I'll tell you, my artistic process kind of goes like this. I have like really grand plans. And then at some point I think to myself, oh my God, I'd be just happy to finish it any way that it can possibly be done. You know, so when I edit, but I edit like in sort of minutiae detail. I don't sort of edit overall big things necessarily. So like, I don't know how many times I've thought this shouldn't be cartoony or this should be. They just come out. If I can't stop them.
Yeah, so when like something's getting like, when you're mid a piece, like through a design, you're like, okay, if there's a darkness to it, you kind of lean into it, or like, you know, the opposite being true of like, you know, if it's more playful or fun and brightly colored, you kind of just lean into that as well.
Yeah, I feel like they're talking to me. I don't want to impose myself on my work. You know, when I did that piece, Murder and Child, of the woman basically throwing her baby down the stairs, I mean, a lot of that work is from when I was younger. Like, I've become an old softie, right? But when I was younger, I was doing these crazy things that were much more dark. I really liked working on the edge where I thought it was just like close to not being something anyone could possibly stand to look at or think about. I was really interested in seeing if I could do that. And now I just, I'm not quite so invested in that. I feel like, I did it enough. Now I just want to do birds and flowers.
Absolutely. And it's just like back to what the woman said to you of, why stained glass? And it's like, well, I mean, stained glass has like a living, like depth and warmth to it. You can look at an oil painting of a sunset, but it doesn't glow like some sunsets, like the
I
way.
really think you should consider coming to one of these stained glass conferences so you can hear like 100 stained glass artists talking about that at once. The roar is deafening. It's basically fetish porn, what you just said for a stained glass artist. Tell me more about the light.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I mean, it was a funny question coming from that person who basically did images on glass vessels themselves. So I thought ultimately maybe they had experienced that question a few too many times for their own taste, and they were paying it forward or something. But whatever. I mean, it's just feels like the tap of a knife on the heel of my boot at this point.
Hey, Judith, Rachel would like to ask you a question.
Okay.
Hi there. I heard you made a comment about you used to be afraid of blood and now you're not. I was wondering if you had any, like a learning curve as far as safety around this art, and if you had any safety procedures that you try to follow as far as with working with glass.
Oh, I try to follow safety procedures. First of all, my first teacher, I showed you her picture, Ursula Huth, was from Stuttgart, Germany. She used to say, Judith, the glass doesn't cut you, you cut yourself on it, basically by being an idiot.
Oh no.
You don't get cut by glass when you're doing stained glass. You get cut by glass when you're reaching into the shelves where you're storing it, or when it's in a trash can. And when there's splinters on the floor and stuff like that, you get them in your feet. I am immaculate because of these cats. I do not want my cats to ever suffer a single instant in their life. But I have had a few nasty glass cuts in my life. There's another one down here. Trash cans, all trash cans. The last time, I am sort of afraid of blood still. I clamped this one shut and I went over to the next door neighbor who's a dentist and I said, "You're a doctor, am I gonna die?" And he's like, "I'm a dentist." And he took me to the emergency room. But for the most part, probably people also freak out because there's lead involved. And I will tell you, I don't know what you have to do to get lead poisoning once you're an adult, but it must be quite drastic because I have a heavy metal talk screen all the time, and I don't take precautions. So there's that.
All right, I just put a note. Oh, yep, I see you, Becky. Go ahead.
Hi, Judith. Thank you for that. Just having been to the exhibition a few times, and I really enjoyed the video of you talking through your processes and stuff. And I was really intrigued by when you was talking more about how you collect imagery. And I was just wondering if that's mainly digital. I know you spoke about it a little bit here, but I was just wondering, do you have like a system of how you collect the images? And if I know you talked about men kneeling was obviously a specific interest here, but how do you categorize, and is there all sorts of different types of imagery that you collect, and is it just digital, and how do you go about organizing that?
Well, it has to be on an external hard drive because it'll fill up my whole hard drive now. It's digital. And I just go on Tumblr and Pinterest and other aggregate sites and look at millions of images and have millions of categories, and the taxonomy is like if I thought about that, I'd probably stay awake at night. So I don't. May I ask, are you from Australia? Did you come all the way from Australia to see my show? You get an A+.
No, I'm from the UK. I moved to Des Moines nearly 3 years ago.
Ah. Well, anyway, yeah, I am an avid collector of imagery. I think there are some artists, well, there's many, many, many artists who say, you know, what inspires you? And they say nature. And it's like, I've never seen a real bird or a real flower, but I like looking at pictures of them. So I collect images of, you know, old field guides. I've got lots of pictures.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, Laura, is there anything that you would like to say in conclusion?
I just want to say thank you to Judith for giving us this time and for all of the art in the show. And I want to say thank you to all of you that are here tonight. I know somebody said they'd seen this show 3 times. We've had such amazing attendance for this show, and it has just really warmed my heart. You know, we were closed for a long time, and people are learning to go back into the world. And so the fact that this show has brought so many people to the Art Center is just, for all of us who work at the Art Center, is so heartwarming. And we couldn't do it without Judith, but we also couldn't do it without you all. So thank you all very, very much.